Facility 57 hummed with an almost unsettling efficiency, a testament to modern engineering. Hidden deep within the dense, sprawling jungle, it was a place where cutting-edge science met a cold disregard for nature's boundaries. The dense canopy above filtered sunlight into fragmented beams, casting eerie shadows on the ground. Inside, the sterile whiteness of the lab was punctuated by the steady beeping of monitors, the low whir of machines, and the occasional guttural hiss from behind reinforced glass. Dr. Fiona Xie strode confidently down the main corridor, clipboard in hand, her white lab coat flaring out behind her. She was a woman of science, her dark hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun, her sharp eyes scanning every detail of the facility. She had spent years perfecting her work, blending the ferocity of dinosaurs with human DNA. Her dream was simple: to create the perfect soldier. Loyal, intelligent, fearless. And, if she allowed herself a rare moment of candor, marketable, "Today's demonstration will knock their socks off," she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. In the observation chamber, Sergeant Max Klein leaned against the wall, arms crossed, radiating skepticism. Max was a grizzled military man, his close-cropped gray hair and perpetual 5 o'clock shadow hinting at a lifetime of bad decisions and even worse deployments. He was the kind of guy who didn't trust anything with more teeth than a Doberman. "What's the plan today, Doc?" Max asked, his gravelly voice dripping with sarcasm. "Gonna teach M to play fetch?" "Something like that," Fiona shot back without missing a beat. She pointed to the reinforced glass, behind which a team of 5 dinosaur hybrids stood at attention. Raptor Unit Bravo. They were an impressive sight, sleek, muscular, and distinctly inhuman. Each soldier was a blend of velociraptor and human DNA, standing upright but with elongated snouts, razor-sharp claws, and tails that twitched with predatory precision. "Gentlemen," Fiona announced, pressing a button to activate the intercom, "we're about to begin the test." One of the raptors, tagged Rex on the monitor, tilted his head and chirped something that sounded suspiciously like a question. Fiona frowned. Is he asking for pizza?" Max asked, barely suppressing a laugh. Fiona's frown deepened. "Rex, focus." The test began with the hybrids navigating an obstacle course designed to mimic urban combat conditions. They leapt over walls, scaled buildings, and executed flawless takedowns on robotic targets. Despite Rex's earlier antics, the squad's performance was undeniably impressive. Even Max found himself nodding, albeit begrudgingly. "Not bad," he admitted. "Still don't trust M, though." Before Fiona could respond, the facility's alarm blared, a deafening wail that froze everyone in place. Red lights flashed, casting ominous shadows across the room. "What now?" Fiona snapped, her voice cutting through the chaos. Max grabbed his comms unit. "Control, report." A voice crackled through the static. "Containment breach in Lab 4. Multiple subjects missing." Fiona's stomach dropped. "Missing?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Axe didn't wait for further clarification. He barked orders into his comms and motioned for Fiona to follow him. "Come on, document. We've got a mess to clean up." They raced through the labyrinthine corridors of the facility, passing panicked scientists and heavily armed security teams. Lab 4 was a scene of devastation. The containment units, massive, reinforced tanks designed to hold the facility's most dangerous specimens, were shattered. Deep claw marks gouged into the walls told a chilling story. "Looks like they didn't just escape," Max muttered. "They tore their way out." Fiona stepped closer to one of the tanks, her eyes narrowing. "These mutations, they're evolving faster than expected." "Great. Just great." Max scanned the room, his hand resting on the grip of his sidearm. "So, where'd they go?" As if in answer, a guttural roar echoed through the facility, followed by the unmistakable sound of gunfire. The breach had triggered chaos throughout Facility 57. Security teams reported sightings of the escapees, but their descriptions were troubling. These weren't the controlled hybrids Fiona had created. They were something else entirely. Larger. More feral. And, most disturbingly, more organized. The first real encounter happened in the facility's armory. A security team had cornered one of the escapees, a hulking brute with the bulk of a T-Rex but the bipedal agility of a human. Its eyes glowed with a predatory intelligence, and its movements were precise, calculated. Max arrived just in time to see the creature disarm one of the guards with a swipe of its massive claw and use the man's own weapon against him. The rest of the team opened fire, but the creature shrugged off the bullets as if they were mosquito bites. It roared, a sound that reverberated through Max's bones, before disappearing into the shadows. Did that thing just shoot back? Max asked, incredulous. Impossible, Fiona said, though her voice lacked conviction. As they moved deeper into the facility, the scope of the situation became horrifyingly clear. The escapees weren't just running. They were planning, coordinating, and, perhaps most disturbingly, breeding. They discovered the first nest in one of the lower storage levels. It was a grotesque, pulsating mass of eggs, guarded by a second-generation hybrid. This one was smaller than the first but faster, with razor-sharp talons and a tail that lashed like a whip. It attacked the moment it sensed intruders, forcing Max and his team into a desperate firefight. Cover me, Fiona shouted, scrambling toward the nest with a makeshift flamethrower. Are you insane? Max barked, firing at the hybrid as it lunged toward them. Those eggs can't survive. Fiona yelled back, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and determination. The flamethrower roared to life, engulfing the nest in a torrent of fire. The hybrid let out a blood-curdling screech, retreating into the shadows. For a moment, silence fell over the room, broken only by the crackling of flames. Did we get it? One of the guards asked. Max shook his head. No way, it's that easy. As if on cue, the hybrid launched itself from the darkness, slamming into Max and pinning him to the ground. Its jaws snapped inches from his face, its hot breath reeking of decay. Max struggled, his strength no match for the creature's primal ferocity. Then, with a deafening bang, the hybrid's head snapped back. It collapsed in a lifeless heap, blood pooling around it. Fiona lowered the smoking rifle she had taken from one of the guards, her hands trembling. You're welcome, she said, her voice unsteady. Max stared at her, then at the dead hybrid. Guess I owe you one. Damn right you do. As the group regrouped, it became clear that the situation was far worse than anyone had imagined. Talon, one of the original hybrids and Fiona's most successful creation, had emerged as the leader of the escapees. Using his enhanced intelligence and knowledge of the facility systems, he had armed his followers and turned the lower levels into a fortress. This isn't an escape, Fiona said grimly. It's a takeover. Max loaded his weapon, his jaw set in determination. Then it's time we remind them who's at the top of the food chain. The team moved out, knowing that the real battle was just beginning. But as they descended into the depths of Facility 57, a nagging thought lingered in Fiona's mind. What if Talon was right? What if the world truly did belong to them? The first stage of the nightmare was over. The real fight was just beginning. Under the dim emergency lights, the air grew thicker with every step. Facility 57's lower levels were a maze of steel corridors, concrete barricades, and flickering monitors, the remnants of a once impenetrable base now overrun by something far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. The group moved cautiously, their footsteps muffled by the oppressive silence. Max took point, his rifle raised and ready. His sharp eyes scanned every shadow, every corner where an ambush might lurk. Fiona followed closely behind, her face pale but resolute, clutching a small tablet linked to the facility's internal systems. The others, 2 security guards and 1 reluctant technician, trailed behind, their fear palpable. A guttural growl echoed from somewhere ahead, low and menacing. Max froze, signaling for the group to stop. He squinted into the darkness, his finger resting lightly on the trigger. I don't like this, he whispered, his voice barely audible. "You don't have to like it," Fiona replied, her voice equally hushed. "You just have to survive it." Before Max could respond, the growl grew louder, followed by the unmistakable sound of claws scraping against metal. Then, silence. Max held his breath, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. His grip tightened on the rifle. A blur of motion exploded from the shadows, a hybrid, its elongated limbs propelling it forward with terrifying speed. It crashed into the lead security guard, knocking him to the ground. The guard screamed, the sound cut short as the creature's claws tore through his armor. "Fire!" Max shouted, opening up with his rifle. The corridor erupted in flashes of light and deafening gunfire as the group unleashed a hailstorm of bullets. The hybrid recoiled, its hide proving tougher than expected. It shrieked and lunged toward Max, only to be stopped midair by a precise headshot from Fiona's borrowed rifle. The creature collapsed, twitching before falling still. The group stood in stunned silence, the acrid smell of gunpowder mixing with the metallic tang of blood. "That was just one," Max muttered, his voice grim. "There's more." As if in answer, a distant roar reverberated through the corridors, a chilling reminder that they were deep in enemy territory. "We need to keep moving," Fiona said, glancing nervously at her tablet. "The reactor core is 2 levels down. If we can reach it, we can overload the facility's power grid and initiate a self-destruct sequence. And blow this place to hell," Max finished. He nodded. "Fine by me." The group pressed on, their nerves fraying with each passing moment. The lower levels were eerily quiet, the silence broken only by the occasional distant sounds of movement. Shadows danced along the walls, their shapes distorted by the flickering emergency lights. Max paused at a junction, holding up a hand to signal the group to stop. He motioned for Fiona to check the tablet. "Which way?" he asked. Fiona studied the screen, her brow furrowing. "Left." Max nodded and took a step forward, just as the floor beneath him gave way. He cursed, barely managing to grab the edge of the hole. The others rushed to help, pulling him back up. He lay on his back, breathing heavily. "What the hell was that?" he demanded. "Looks like they've been sabotaging the structural integrity," Fiona said, glancing down into the pit. "They're hurting us." Max's jaw tightened. "Smart bastards." They adjusted their route, moving cautiously around the trap. Every step felt like a gamble, every shadow a potential threat. The tension was suffocating, a constant reminder of how badly things had spiraled out of control. The group finally reached the access shaft leading to the reactor core. Fiona tapped on her tablet, overriding the lock on the heavy steel door. It slid open with a groan, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling downward into darkness. "Of course," Max muttered. "Couldn't just be an elevator." The group descended in single file, their weapons ready. The air grew hotter and heavier as they neared the core, the hum of machinery growing louder. The stairs ended in a massive chamber dominated by the reactor, its pulsating energy casting an eerie blue glow. Fiona immediately moved to the control panel, her fingers flying across the touchscreen. "I need a few minutes to set this up," she said. "You've got 2, Max replied, positioning himself near the entrance. The others took up defensive positions, their eyes darting nervously around the room. The first attack came without warning. A hybrid dropped from the ceiling, landing on the technician and crushing him instantly. The creature roared, its jagged teeth glinting in the blue light. Max opened fire, his bullet sparking against the creature's tough hide. The others joined in, their combined firepower finally bringing the hybrid down. "Keep them off me," Fiona shouted, not looking up from the panel. "No pressure," Max muttered, reloading his rifle. More hybrids poured into the room, their shrieks echoing off the walls. The battle was chaos, a blur of gunfire, claws, and blood. The hybrids were relentless, their movements coordinated and precise. Max fought with everything he had, his body moving on instinct. He took down one creature with a well-placed shot to the eye, only to be tackled by another. He struggled, driving his combat knife into the creature's neck. It screeched and thrashed before finally going limp. "We're running out of time," Fiona yelled. Sweat poured down her face as she worked frantically, the panel screen flashing with warnings, "Tell me something I don't know." Max shouted back, shooting another hybrid as it lunged toward him. The last creature fell just as Fiona let out a triumphant cry. "Got it. The sequence is set. Then let's get the hell out of here." Max barked. The group made a desperate dash for the stairs, their breaths ragged and their bodies battered. The facility shook as the self-destruct sequence began, the reactor's hum rising to a deafening roar. Explosions erupted in the distance, the walls trembling with each blast. They reached the upper levels just as the final evacuation alarm blared. The group stumbled out into the open air, the jungle a welcome sight after the claustrophobic confines of the facility. Behind them, Facility 57 imploded, a massive fireball erupting into the sky. For a moment, there was only silence. Then Max turned to Fiona, his face grim. "Think that was all of them?" Fiona didn't answer. She didn't need to. From the shadows of the jungle, a pair of glowing eyes watched them. Talon had survived, and he wasn't alone. The nightmare wasn't over. It was just beginning. The jungle was alive with the sounds of the night, chirping insects, rustling leaves, and the distant growl of something far too large to belong in this world. Max crouched low in the underbrush, his rifle trained on a narrow path leading toward the distant remnants of Facility 57. Smoke and fire still billowed into the sky, casting an eerie orange glow over the treetops. Beside him, Fiona struggled to catch her breath, her face pale and slick with sweat. "How much ammo you got left?" Max asked without turning his head. "Not enough," Fiona replied, her voice tight. She adjusted the rifle she'd scavenged from the facility. "And I'm not exactly a marksman." "Well, you're about to get some practice," Max said grimly. He motioned for her to stay low. "We're being hunted." Fiona froze. "By who? Or what?" "Take your pick," Max muttered. He glanced toward the other survivors, a single security guard with a nasty gash on his arm and a nervous-looking scientist who hadn't stopped shaking since they'd escaped the blast. "Stay sharp, all of you." The jungle was unnervingly silent now, the earlier sounds of wildlife replaced by an oppressive stillness. Max knew what that meant. Predators were near. A low growl cut through the air, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps. Max held up a hand, signaling the group to stay quiet. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until a massive shadow emerged from the trees. It was one of the hybrids, but this one was different. Larger, more monstrous. Its body was heavily mutated, its muscles bulging unnaturally, and its eyes glowed with a cold intelligence. It sniffed the air, its nostrils flaring, and let out a guttural roar that shook the ground. "Scatter!" Max shouted, opening fire. The group broke apart, diving into the underbrush as the hybrid charged. Max's bullets ricocheted off its thick hide, barely slowing it down. It lunged at him, its claws slashing through the foliage. Max rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the attack. He fired again, aiming for its eyes, but the creature moved with alarming speed, disappearing into the shadows. Fiona scrambled through the underbrush, her heart pounding. She could hear the hybrid crashing through the jungle behind her, its heavy footsteps shaking the ground. She spotted a fallen tree and dove behind it, clutching her rifle tightly. "Fiona." Max's voice cut through the chaos. "Stay down." The hybrid burst through the trees, its glowing eyes locking onto Fiona. It roared and lunged, its claws slashing through the air. Fiona screamed and fired blindly, the recoil nearly knocking her over. The bullets hit their mark, striking the creature's shoulder and slowing it down just enough for Max to appear from the side, his combat knife gleaming in the moonlight. With a primal yell, Max drove the knife into the creature's neck. It thrashed violently, throwing him off, but the wound was deep, and blood gushed from the injury. The hybrid let out a final, guttural growl before collapsing in a heap. Max staggered to his feet, breathing heavily. That one was new, he said, wiping the blood from his knife. Stronger, faster. They're adapting. Adapting to what? Fiona asked, her voice shaking. To us? To everything, Max replied. He glanced around the jungle, his expression grim. And I don't think they're working alone anymore. As if to confirm his suspicion, a distant roar echoed through the trees. It was deeper, louder, more commanding. Fiona's blood ran cold. Talon, she whispered. Max nodded. He's still alive. And he's rallying them. The group didn't wait to see what would happen next. They moved quickly, weaving through the dense jungle in search of higher ground. Max led the way, his military instincts kicking in as he assessed their surroundings. The air was thick with tension, every rustle of leaves or snap of a branch sending a jolt of fear through the group. After what felt like hours, they emerged onto a rocky outcrop overlooking the jungle. The remnants of Facility 57 were visible in the distance, a smoldering ruin surrounded by darkness. Max set up a small perimeter, using what little supplies they had to create makeshift defenses. Fiona sank to the ground, her body trembling from exhaustion. We can't keep running, she said. They'll find us no matter where we go. Max didn't argue. He knew she was right. Talon wasn't just hunting them, he was driving them into a corner. And once they had nowhere left to run, he would strike. We need to find help, Max said finally. Military, government, anyone who can bring enough firepower to take these things down. Fiona shook her head. You saw what happened at the facility. They were prepared for an outbreak, and it still wasn't enough. What makes you think anyone else can stop them? Because we don't have a choice, Max said firmly. If we don't warn them, Talon's army will spread. And once they're out of this jungle, there's no stopping them. A sudden rustling in the trees brought the group to attention. Max raised his rifle, his finger on the trigger. Fiona held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. A figure emerged from the shadows, its silhouette unmistakably human. It was one of the rogue hybrids, smaller and less mutated than the others. Its eyes glowed faintly in the dark, but there was no hostility in its posture. Max didn't lower his weapon. Stay back. The hybrid raised its hands, a gesture of surrender. Its voice was rough, guttural, but surprisingly articulate. I help. Fiona's eyes widened. You can talk. The hybrid nodded. Not like them, it said slowly. Not with Talon. Max frowned. Why should we trust you? The hybrid hesitated, its expression conflicted. Talon, wrong, it said finally. He will destroy all. Not just you. Us too. Fiona glanced at Max. What do we do? Max sighed, lowering his rifle slightly. We listen. For now. The hybrid stepped closer, its movements cautious. Talon plans, more than war. He builds, new world. No humans. Max's grip on his rifle tightened. Then we stop him. The hybrid nodded. I know, way. But not easy. Nothing worth doing ever is, Max muttered. The group prepared to move, their newfound ally leading the way. The jungle loomed around them, dark and foreboding. The fight for survival wasn't over, it was only just beginning. And somewhere in the shadows, Talon waited, his plans unfolding with every passing moment. The nightmare was far from finished. It had only just begun.